Good evening, America. Welcome to the Monday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. in the WiredToFishCoffee.com studios. You know this Wired to Fish Coffee is the official coffee of Just the News. It's my family's favorite coffee, my personal favorite coffee. You can go there right now, wired2fishcoffee.com, or point your camera to that QR code, and you'll get a fantastic 10% discount on all of their smooth blends, as well as their mugs, including the Just the News mugs. There's also autographed copies of my book there. Just go check it out. If you use the promo code JustNews at checkout, 10% off. It's a great deal. All right, first a little announcement about my wardrobe. No, I'm not trying to mimic my good friend Eric or others with my wardrobe. But for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be wearing this little special thing. I had a little mishap, so I apologize for not being in my suit and tie. But as soon as I get back into it, I promise you I will. But that doesn't mean we're not going to stop on the front lines of doing investigative reporting. We got another very important story that my colleague Stephen Richards and I broke this morning. New emails we got from Joe Biden's fake email account, the pseudonym email account, show that while he and President Obama were talking tough against Russia in 2014 after Russia invaded Ukraine the first time, behind the scenes it was a little bit different story. That's right. Joe Biden secretly worked with Germany to open a backdoor so that the Russians could keep selling and moving gas into Ukraine even after they invaded that country and were subject to all sorts of sanctions. Now, why is this so important, and why is it coming out now? Well, the answer why it's coming out now, for the last 10 years, we didn't know that these email exchanges were on Joe Biden's pseudonym email account. And we're going to show you a couple documents. If the studio will pick this up for me, let's show the unredacted version we got in our redacted version we got in our lawsuit. All right, that's the real law. That's the real one. We got that from James Comer and the House Oversight Committee. It explains in a second. I'm going to read it to you. But let's show the other version that we first got from the National Archives when we sued. A complete blank. Everything was taken out of it. Said they couldn't share it with us 10 years later. Well, we now know why, because it was embarrassing to Joe Biden and the Obama-Biden administration. Why do I say that? Because it turns out that when Joe Biden was negotiating this deal secretly on his private email account, his son's company, Burisma, you know them, we've been talking about them a lot for the last 5 years. Well, they just wanted this very thing to happen. They wanted Russian oil to come back into Ukraine because they, Burisma, didn't have enough gas to sell in Ukraine, and they would have been blamed for a major spike in gas prices across Ukraine. They didn't want the shame, so Hunter Biden and his partners were talking about getting the Russian oil flowing, and guess what happened? It did with the help of Joe Biden. I'm going to read you the important passage. This is an email from Joe Biden's Deputy National Security Advisor to the Vice President on his private email account. This is government business being done in private email. Ukraine gas deal was just signed. The Germans earlier indicated to Tony that your call had come at a critical moment. Amos, with an assist here internally from your team, was critical to the end game. What they're talking about is the announcement that Germany would later make and take blame for. Germany got the blame for this, that Russia was going to move the gas into Ukraine. It turns out Joe Biden had a lot more to do about it. That's a familiar story, Amanda. We've heard a lot about it. Joe Biden saying one thing and doing another.
Indeed. And you might have a cast, but I had ringside seats, and you all should see the other guy. Just want to make sure we clarify that.
I fought a pothole and I lost. That's the real truth of it. Yeah.
Listen, I have extra accessories, black smudges on my outfit because I fought the subway this morning, and it didn't work out very well. The doors closed on me, and I had to, I didn't think it was going to let me go. I had visions of me just like,
awful?
Yeah, and I don't think anybody in the city would have helped me. I don't know if they would have grabbed me and pulled me out.
No, they just watch and look and stare.
Look, I made it here alive, and so did you, so I guess praise God for
Well,
that. All right, I'm going to start at the White House, my regular beat, because earlier today, President Trump met with El Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, and CNN asked Bukele to weigh in on the Supreme Court ruling that says the Trump administration needs to bring the deported Maryland migrant back to this country. Now, this is what he said, and it is making headlines around the world.
Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Equated it to smuggling a terrorist back into this country. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where all of this goes, because the Supreme Court did rule that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of this man. But Bukele says that he simply can't do that. And Attorney General Pam Bondi also spoke about the issue, saying the migrant was in the country illegally. Take a listen.
He was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us.
We're going to have more on this issue a little later in the show, but John, I can't wait to talk to our first guest about this issue you talked about.
Oh, yeah, I love it. Also, just a quick note on El Salvador this morning. It's 4 decades ago that Ronald Reagan fought to keep El Salvador out of communism's hands. And today, El Salvador is helping Donald Trump repair the damage of the Biden open borders. What a remarkable symmetry and long-running relationship between those two countries. Pretty remarkable. Yeah. All right, earlier today, we had a chance to talk to the Director of Research at the Government Accountability Institute, better known as our good friend and the great investigative reporter, Sheamus Bruner, about the scoop we talked about. Have a listen. All right, folks, joining us right now, the Director of Research at the Government Accountability Institute and the best-selling author alongside of me on multiple books, one of them mine, Fallout. He helped co-write that with me, but he's also got that great book, Control Oligarchs. He's a great friend of the show, one of the greatest investigative journalists I've ever worked with, our friend, Sheamus Bruner. Sheamus, welcome back.
John, Amanda, it is great to see you. And on the point about Fallout, its sales must still be going. I bought, personally, the last hard copy yesterday. I ran out of my own supply, and now it's
time for
it's
a
gone.
reprint.
That's tragic. We're going to have to do something about that.
I'm feeling like it might be time to do Fallout 2 because it's still relevant today. I mean, think about what we're learning in these new documents today. Joe Biden is out there publicly saying we must punish Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. His son's already cashing in on the scenario by going to work for Burisma. And then we find out Joe Biden secretly is creating a backdoor so that Russia can send its gas into Ukraine because Burisma can't meet the demand, and his word they're going to get blamed for inflation. It seems like there's a lot of secrets still coming out from Fallout 10 years later.
Yeah, you're exactly right. These documents that you posted on Just the News, these are amazing. It shows that Joe Biden, we always wondered, I mean, what was Hunter getting paid for by Burisma? Was it just because of the that quid pro quo towards the end with the you're not getting the $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor? Was it just to get Zlochevsky out of legal hot water? And no, this shows that it was actually to learn a lot of intelligence about what was going on in people like Joe Biden's minds. He's saying one thing publicly, and then behind the scenes, he's talking about things that might help Russia. So these are really shocking documents, and it's not the only example, but it is certainly the most egregious example of the Democrats cashing in on the Russia-Ukraine scenario.
Yeah. Speaking of Democrats cashing in, a few weeks ago, everybody had a lot of bad things to say about Signal, but I think Joe Biden's probably wishing he had used Signal at about this time because they called that a national security crisis. Wouldn't this be a national security issue too?
Yeah, I mean, it's really odd that Joe Biden had these pseudonyms and he was sending government discussion type stuff on these pseudonyms. He had the secret cell phone and, was talking offline in ways that could easily be hacked, bypassing the national security protocols. So, yeah, you're exactly right, Amanda. And of course, Hillary famously had the secret server. So it looks like these guys really do like to just talk in unsecure ways about very important matters.
Yeah, pretty remarkable. One of the great things that we were able to do together in Fallout was to track the 8-year history of the Obama-Biden administration on Russia, because they came in saying, we're not going to be as hardline on Russia because I think we can win their hearts by bestowing them a lot of appeasement and gifts. And so they give away uranium and other things to them. And then, of course, they get crossways and Russia takes advantage of them and invades Ukraine. How much do you think Americans still don't know about this time? It seems like we're still blind to a lot of very important pieces of information when it comes to what the Obama administration, particularly Joe Biden and his family, were doing on the Russian front.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a whole lot we don't know. I mean, we've got the broad outlines. We've got maybe 50% of the puzzle made, but there's still a lot of pieces that need fitting in. And so, again, I applaud you for the story that you and Stephen did today. It's a great story, and look forward to hearing more. These documents need to come out. Donald Trump needs to keep declassifying and releasing this stuff.
Yeah, keep them coming. That's right.
Sheamus, people love to talk about how Barack Obama didn't have a single scandal during this administration. I know this is Joe Biden as vice president, and I suppose there's a possibility that Barack Obama as president didn't know, but considering that there was a relationship being brokered by even a third country, Germany, wouldn't you think that Obama would have had to have been looped in on all of this and possibly known about the communications too?
Yeah, absolutely. They say scandal-free. It was, no, the Obama presidency was a scandal spree, and it wasn't just Joe. It was Barack Obama. And I think one of the things that really, is waiting to come out, I've got a lot of research on it, haven't published it yet, is about the Obama book deal. The Obama book deal, $60 million from a German publisher. What was that all about? And we've got some evidence and some theories we'll release soon.
That's huge. That is huge. All right, another thing we've gotten a hold of in the last few days, also Russia related, are some of the newly declassified documents from the Russia collusion, i.e. Crossfire Hurricane investigation. One of the big headlines we had this week, and everyone's been talking about, the NSA director, by the way, someone that Donald Trump inherited from Barack Obama, told the FBI that the Washington Post story, a Pulitzer Prize winning story, that Donald Trump had pressured him to change the story on Russia collusion and Russia involvement in the 2016 election, was simply, in his words, wrong, not true, inaccurate. He went through debunking it line by line, and then also the FBI document reveals there was a contemporaneous record of this discussion that showed that nothing about the Washington Post claimed to happen actually happened in the discussion. Is it time for the Washington Post to renounce its Pulitzer Prize, to correct its Pulitzer Prize story? What do you think would come of this?
I mean, totally should give it back, and it's just such a shame what's happened to the Pulitzer Committee. It used to mean something to win a Pulitzer, and ever since 2016, I've watched year after year they give Pulitzers to total disinformation. I remember the New York Times also got a Pulitzer for its Russia reporting, which was totally wrong. And so, you're going to hate that I say this, John, but you and Peter Schweitzer should have won Pulitzers for the reporting you did on Hillary Clinton and the Russia uranium and everything that you exposed first on the Spygate saga. It was incredible reporting, and people are finally starting to realize John Solomon was right.
Absolutely, on many fronts. Sheamus, I know that government accountability, I mean, it's in the name of your institute, but transparency and disclosure is at the heart of everything that you stand for and seek. When it comes to what Trump can declassify this time around, it's his second term. He doesn't have to worry about making anybody mad so that he has to face re-election. As a journalist or as an investigator yourself, what do you want to see declassified? What's the top of the top for you?
Well, I was really excited when John sent me this story that he broke about the Robin Ware and all of the pseudonymous Biden email messages. Those are going to be great. Everything relating to the Biden-Ukraine, it'll be great to see what was going on with the Biden-China stuff. And, I hate to dredge up ancient history, but, and again, this Russiagate stuff, Hillary Clinton, she just needs to be fully exposed. I mean, John and we put out so much on the Russia Uranium One story. That really was a scandal for the pay to play. I'd love to see, I don't think they'll release CFIUS deliberations, but anything else relating to that, whether or not Hillary played any role, because she said she had no role, but it was her department and her foundation donors who stood to gain. So that's always been a white whale, is what exactly went on. How did they get this Russian uranium deal through? And then as far as the Spygate stuff, we know a lot about that, but there's more names involved. I know that, and they need to not only be declassified, but also have security clearances yanked.
Yeah, so important. Uranium One, we still believe there was a government agency that might have objected to that deal going through, which would debunk the entire narrative. We still don't have those documents. That'd be a good place for President Trump to start, I would guess. What do you think, Sheamus?
Yeah, that's right. And there were a lot of other Russian scandals, too. The whole spy ring. I mean, you remember the spy ring. We talked about that. The whole Skolkovo deal. Joe Biden flew to Moscow and pimped this Silicon Valley of Moscow deal. Why were they giving so many favors to Russia only to turn around and then, help with the overthrow of Ukraine and the installation of new leadership there? The whole Russia-Ukraine thing, I think we're just just the tip of the iceberg, really.
Sheamus, before we let you go, when it comes to security clearances, I think most people think that this is something that is coveted and exclusive, and so few have it in Washington, which I think is frankly how it should be. But that's not the case. You have people in law firms staffed all across this city and even outside the Beltway who have these security clearances. President Trump yanking them seems like one by one. Good idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, it's not a select group. John, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's millions of people who have security clearance, or at least millions that have had them at one time, who are still around. It's a ton of contractors and not government employees. But then the government employees, you don't need to yank everybody's. There's people working on sensitive stuff that need those clearances. It's these political operatives and these people who go to CNN to get a TV deal, or MSNBC to get a TV deal, and somehow they still have their clearances, or they go work through the revolving door at the contractors, selling access to vital national security information. They need to have their, at a minimum, reviewed. I don't know about just flat out revoking everybody's, but it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be a pretty regular thing to review these clearances.
Yeah, pretty amazing. You always give us a ton of wisdom and great reporting. Today, you might have given us a great hashtag there, Sheamus, because I think hashtag WAPO, give it back, might be actually something that could start trending on Twitter tonight. We'll see whether that goes, or I should say X, excuse me. As always, my friend, you do great work at the Government Accountability Institute with our good friend Peter Schweitzer. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thanks, Amanda.
All right, that was so much fun. All right, coming up after the commercial break, President Trump and El Salvador President Bukele met today. They had a lot to discuss, and we'll break it all down next right after these messages. Hey, folks, did you know that other seniors group, AARP, has promoted Drag Queen Story Hour events? Really, it's true. And it's just one example of their steady shift towards a progressive political agenda. They supported Obamacare, opposed the Trump tax cuts, and they continue to align with policies that many everyday Americans simply don't agree with. That's why more and more people are turning to AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens. It's a conservative alternative to AARP. AMAC is working hard to protect Social Security, fight for election integrity, and promote the constitutional and common sense values that matter to you and me. And it's not just for seniors. Anyone can join regardless of age. Right now, AMAC is offering an exclusive deal, a 5-year membership. That's what I am. I've joined for 5 years for just $31. That's 47% off the regular rate of $60. But this special offer ends April 30th. So hurry up, go check it out. Your dues don't go to woke causes. They go towards supporting AMAC's advocacy work in Washington and across the country. To learn more and join today, visit amac.us/justnews. That's AMAC, AMAC.us/justnews.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. Before we get into our topics of immigration, we have an immigration-related update for you, a news blast for all of you. Some of you might be aware the trial of Rachel Morin has been happening the last few weeks. That is the Maryland mother of 5 who was murdered in 2023. Her killer, Victor Martinez Hernandez, guilty on all 4 counts. That just came out about 10 minutes ago. If you want to read the full rundown, you can head over to justthenews.com, where there is a full report from one of our great reporters, Misty Severy. All right, everybody. So President Trump, of course, met with El Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele today, and of course, they discussed their deal of sending dangerous illegal alien criminals to that country, as well as the Supreme Court ruling that the Trump administration must facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man who was deported to that country by mistake. So joining us now to talk about that and much more, including kicking out Chinese influence in Central and South America, senior policy analyst for the Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation, Andres Martinez Fernandez. Andres, great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, President Trump has brokered some amazing deals with other nations, but this deal to transport illegal immigrants away from our country, have them housed and imprisoned in El Salvador, it is, I think it is outside the box and something that has proven to be extremely beneficial. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. This is one of the big problems with the mass migration crisis that the Biden administration unleashed on the U.S. It has been, of course, the arrival of thousands, tens of thousands of criminals associated with criminal organizations and, as we now recognize them, terrorist organizations within U.S. cities and across the country. And many times, unfortunately, these criminals come from countries like Venezuela, where we have challenges as far as repatriating them because of the lack of cooperation of those governments and dictatorial regimes. Thankfully, El Salvador is being a forward-leaning partner for the United States on this crisis under President Bukele, and stepping up to partner with the U.S. to make sure that there's a sustainable approach to this challenge, which is really a shared challenge for the hemisphere. And I've been traveling all across Latin America, and you hear all about the challenges that mass migration, criminality from Venezuelan gangs like Tren de Aragua and others have brought to new cities, once peaceful cities and countries in the hemisphere. So it's really something that it requires joint attention. And for me, this meeting shows that the United States under President Trump is going to be focused and engaged with our hemisphere to advance U.S. interests and security.
Yeah, really important. There's a moment where President Bukele makes up a good point, which is he doesn't have any obligation to return this citizen of his country who is lawfully ordered to be deported by the United States and who is considered by his own country to be a bad actor. Is there a little bit of a crisis ahead of us that maybe El Salvador won't send back this gentleman who's been deported?
Well, I think the only crisis is going to be one that's manufactured by the media, frankly. This is someone who has, by multiple U.S. courts, been found to be associated with MS-13 gang and has had a deportation order against him. And now with new changes under the U.S. to how we recognize these organizations as foreign terrorists, the Trump administration moved to deport him in cooperation with the government in El Salvador, again, going to that sustained cooperation, effective cooperation that we see. Frankly, the fact that this has become the central issue for this very important visit from El Salvador's president to the White House, where we have so many issues in our hemisphere to address, including the presence of China and others, it's a shame because this is a non-issue in a lot of ways. This is not, as has been said by the administration, this is not an American citizen. This is someone who is here illegally or in the United States illegally. And is now in his country, frankly. And again, there are these very concerning criminal and foreign terrorist connections, which led to the decision to deport him.
Yeah, good point.
Andres, the media seems to take a few token stories out of the illegal immigration story and they exploit it. We saw it in President Trump's first term with the mother, with the child, on the cover of Time magazine. I remember back from my childhood, I think I was in elementary school, Elian Gonzalez, and holy smokes, what an issue that was. And now I see this issue, and I am fearful that media, Democrats, whoever, are going to take this and use it for bad and use it to change minds in this country back in the other direction. How can the Trump administration prevent that?
Well, I think that's a valid concern because clearly the media has hooked onto this and is trying to do just that, make a crisis out of it. Listen, I think that the American people made their voice loud and clear in the elections last year about how they feel about the criminal, illegal alien presence in the United States. So if folks in the media and the Democratic Party want to make this the hill that where they make their stand, which would be preventing the deportation of illegal aliens with criminal ties, then I say go ahead. I think it's going to work out pretty badly for them, and it's going to reflect positively on the United States that we can develop these partnerships. Once again, it shows that we have so much of an interest from within Latin America to also confront these issues, that we have such a level of cooperation. This is not what we had in the past, and things have changed. And unfortunately for the United States, a lot of the media in the United States, a lot of the elites in the Democratic Party, they just haven't woken up to the terrible danger and effects that illegal mass migration and criminal gangs have had on the American people.
Andres, there's a real irony that 40 years after Ronald Reagan tried to spare parts of Central America and Latin America from communism, that countries like El Salvador are now trying to help free us from the scourge of the Biden border crisis. Talk a little bit about what happened with Daniel Noboa winning in Ecuador. You've got a conservative in Argentina, a conservative in El Salvador. It seems like common sense American politics paid off from the Reagan era to the Trump era.
Yeah, there's definitely a revival going on in a lot of Latin America of common sense, conservative values, and I'm in Ecuador right now, and there's not there's a complex political identity to President Noboa, but he's certainly very much aligned with the United States on many issues, and he just won overwhelmingly against Luisa Gonzalez, who is the protege of President Correa, Rafael Correa, who's a far-left socialist anti-American, lost by 10 points in this election. So a resounding rejection of the far left's attempted return there. You've seen in Argentina the really stunning victory of President Milei, which has been continued with significant victories in economic reforms of the kind that a lot of experts and others said would be impossible in Argentina. But it shows you there and elsewhere what uncompromising, forward-leaning leadership in cooperation with the United States and with the support of this White House, which the region's allies of the U.S. certainly have, can deliver for our hemisphere. And I think that's so important because the Western Hemisphere, where we are, it has so much of an impact on the well-being and security and prosperity of the American people. Unfortunately, under President Biden, we ignored that, and that led to 100,000 overdose deaths from fentanyl a year, mass migration, destabilizing U.S. cities, and all sorts of economic interests that went underaddressed throughout our hemisphere. So that's something that President Trump is changing, and it's about time.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, bringing the whole hemisphere into it, I think, is something that, and you look at Mexico. El Salvador went from being the murder capital of the world to now being a level 1 travel place, which basically means it's the safest of the safe. So I would love to see that in some of the other Central American countries. Andres Martinez Fernandez from the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, after the break, the fallout from President Trump's tariff policies continues, and the White House says we are already seeing results. So we're going to examine that next.
Hey, it's a new day in America and a new administration in Washington, D.C. There's a lot of excitement and optimism about the future, but the reality is there's a lot of work to do as well, especially when it comes to fixing our broken healthcare system. The truth is that the forces that are responsible for breaking our healthcare system aren't going to simply go away. The challenges our system faces won't disappear overnight. Now more than ever, you need to be prepared. That's where the Wellness Company comes in. Their doctors are medical professionals that you can trust, and their line of prescription medical kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy, as well as your family. Whether it's the medical emergency kit, the contagion kit, the first aid kit, or the travel kit, these prescription kits contain an assortment of life-saving medications and guidebooks to assist in the proper use of these medications. From the flu to strep throat, from COVID to the bird flu, from a trip to the beach to a trip overseas, the Wellness Company has a prescription kit designed to keep you and your family safe. Make America healthy again. Start at home. Do your part and protect the health of you and your family. Go to twc.health/justnews today and order. That's twc.health/justnews and use the promo code JUSTNEWS to save 10% off. Welcome back, America. Over the weekend, you probably missed this because most of the mainstream media didn't cover it, though we did adjust the news. Peter Navarro, the trade rep for President Trump, trade advisor for President Trump, said that more than 90 countries are in position to make a deal in the next few months for better trade privileges for America, better trade terms for America. 90 countries, almost half the world. That's just remarkable. Things that are getting covered up all the time, Amanda. It's just so frustrating. Well, joining us now, the co-host of the Thrive Time radio show, contributor for Entrepreneur Magazine, and he just had Eric Trump speak at one of his recent business workshops. He is Clay Clark. Clay, good to have you back on the show.
Hey, thanks for letting me be here with you on your broadcast today. I really do appreciate you.
We love having you on. We love the energy, the excitement, and also the focus you bring to Main Street. Because I think at the end of the day, when we get all done with this tariff policy and it all shakes out and the media's hysteria is over, small business America is going to be thriving as a result of this. Am I right about that?
Well, I'll say this. The only reason most people know me or that I'm relevant is I was the Entrepreneur of the Year for the Small Business Administration back in 2007. And I built, many, many years ago, I built a very large company called DJConnection.com, which I haven't owned in a long time. But we were doing up to 4,000 weddings a year. If you can picture that, that's 80 weddings every weekend, sound, lights, entertainment. And I sold that company and then invested in a dental practice. And I started doing a home flipping and remodeling. And so today, for anybody who goes to thrivetimeshow.com, you'll know I work with doctors, dentists, lawyers, and Main Street. And so to get to answer your question, the average dentist, doctor, lawyer, restaurant owner that I work with, they are so excited about what President Trump is doing to revive the American economy. They're excited about the return of a showerhead that makes sense. They're excited about deregulation. They're excited about a business owner, a man who's built a business empire, actually leading the free world. And so most American business owners that I know, I'm not talking about some of the talking heads and some of the big mainstream media. I'm talking about these average business owners. They could not be more excited about the energy that President Trump has brought back to the economy. Also, I will tell you, the home builders that I work with and the mortgage providers that I work with, they're telling me that more and more average Americans are looking to build a new home. They're looking to get a mortgage. They're looking to buy a new vehicle. Why? Because consumer confidence is beginning to soar amongst Main Street business owners. So again, I think that President Trump is bringing a lot of confidence back to the American business owner. And I will also tell you that the mainstream media that's always hated President Trump will continue to try to speak negatively about his policies. But what he's trying to do is he's trying to course correct 4 years of Joe Biden jackassery, and he's trying to bring it back into an economic, sustainable system that makes sense. So again, he's had 4 years of Joe Biden's jackassery he's tried to correct in 90 days or 120 days. So I would say President Trump is doing a very good job of doing a dramatic course correction.
When it comes to no pain, no gain, because I do feel like this ultimately at the end will be a gain for the American people, a gain for American workers, a gain for American entrepreneurs. But when it comes to the pain in the pocketbook for the American people, how protracted do you anticipate that's going to be?
Well, it's a great question, and I don't want to mislead anybody. I will just say that imagine America was in a boat and we were going the wrong direction for 4 consecutive years and we're about ready to hit the shore. If President Trump took the figurative wheel and turned that wheel aggressively, and you're in that boat, it's probably not going to feel very good at that moment. However, Peter Navarro, who I consider to be a very dear friend of mine, Peter Navarro, a top advisor to President Trump, he has said, and to quote you what you said earlier, he has said that over 90 countries are now looking to do deals with these United States. So 90 countries. So think about that. I mean, I think under Joe Biden's watch, a lot of countries were concerned about America. They didn't consider America to be a serious nation. Now President Trump has 90 countries willing to work with him. And in America, we unfortunately have outsourced our core competencies where we don't make a lot of things in America. And so to bring manufacturing back to America, America has to become competitive in the world marketplace. So I believe President Trump is taking aggressive action. But back to my analogy, I wish I had a better one. Imagine you're in a boat with somebody who's been driving that pontoon boat while drunk near into the shore, right there. This is a drunk man, a.k.a. Joe Biden, driving a figurative pontoon boat right into the shore. And President Trump grabs the wheel and says, "Kids, get ready." And he's turning that thing, and we're all going, has Dad lost his mind? But if you knew how close we were to hitting the shore, it would make sense. So I would just applaud President Trump's aggressive action and for bringing back the shower head.
And incandescent light bulbs.
Yeah, incandescent light bulbs, so sure, absolutely. Okay, real quickly, you're doing some fun stuff with Eric Trump, and you mentioned you had won the SBA Entrepreneur of the Year back in 2007. You've never forgotten about Main Street. You're on Main Street every day advocating and training and creating the next generation of entrepreneurs. Tell us what you got going with Eric Trump.
Basically what we do is I've been doing this for 20 years now, okay? So it's a 2-day interactive business workshop. We teach branding, marketing, sales, search engine optimization. How do you optimize a website? Finance. How do you hire, inspire, train, and retain great employees? How do you build a successful company? I mean, at the end of the day, what are the steps? Step 1, step 2, step 3. And so Eric Trump has teamed up with us to make American business great again. So if you go to thrivetimeshow.com, you'll see that Tim Tebow is joining me at the June conference, and Eric Trump will be joining us once again during the September conference. And Eric has already joined us at previous conferences. I think Eric and I have now done 24 events together. So I encourage everybody out there, if you want to see Eric Trump talk about branding, marketing, sales, accounting, how do you find good employees? How do you build a workflow? How do you find a problem and solve it? How do you make a profitable business? How do you build a Main Street business? Go to thrivetimeshow.com, and our tickets are $250 or whatever price you want to pay. So if you're watching today's show and you grew up poor like I did, you can name your price. So just go to thrivetimeshow.com. I think everybody sometimes needs a hand up, not a hand out. So you can name your price if you need to. So it's $250 or whatever price you can afford there. And that's thrivetimeshow.com. And we have a 300 people person capacity. So it's 300 people capacity. So everybody will be able to ask a question. You'll be able to interact. It really is a small venue that's designed to be very accessible, so you can ask Eric Trump, Tim Tebow, those kind of people, your specific business questions. So I could not be more excited about that event, and you can learn more at thrivetimeshow.com. And yes, I continue to be America's most pale male.
I love it. I love what you're doing. That sounds like such a fantastic deal. $250 to basically learn how to start a business. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Clay Clark, host of the Thrive Time radio show. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, coming up after the break, tax day is just around the corner. Oh my gosh. Have I filed an extension? Yes, I have. All right. And it's a lot of Americans panicking, including me. We're going to get to that after this. Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. The day many Americans wish that they could avoid every year is upon us. Of course, I am talking about tax day, and it is tomorrow. So if you haven't filed your taxes, you better very soon or file an extension like I did. And we know that President Trump and Congress are looking to lower most people's taxes, maybe substantially, but can they do it? And how about replacing some of that income tax money with tariffs? Is that even a viable strategy? Joining us now to discuss that and much more is the CEO of Finseca, Mark Carden. Mark, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with the most enticing tidbit there, which is doing away with the IRS, having an ERS, or maybe I would be happy with even like a mix of in between, of just filling the IRS bucket with more tariff money instead of Americans' hard-earned money. Is it possible?
Well, look, I don't think anybody's seriously talking about replacing all of the IRS, although the president's clearly making a move to get rid of all the IRS agents that former administration hired, and clearly making a move to impose more tariffs and kind of restructure the world economy. So I think that will help, but I don't think anybody's seriously saying we're going to get rid of the IRS.
Yeah, I think you're right. Not in the short term, as exciting as that might be to some people. My colleague aside, here, one of them. Mark, I want to ask a little bit about the Get Tough on Taxes initiative that Joe Biden did, because at the end of the day, there doesn't seem to be much evidence that it had much of an effect. It seems to have targeted low-income people from the data that we've been able to get from the Syracuse University Track Research Center. And then you've got federal officials who are deadbeats. A lot of federal workers are deadbeats. A new study came out recently about that. Did Joe Biden really affect any improvement in the collection of taxes during his 4 years?
Well, I think the one thing that the Biden administration did a very good job of is increasing the regulatory burden on all Americans. Just look at the 1099 provision, which I know you talk about a lot, but you're transferring $600 or more over Venmo, and all of a sudden you're going to get a 1099 form from the IRS. And I think that was emblematic of kind of a broader regulatory state. We saw it across every industry, across all departments. There just really was an unquestioned increase in the regulatory state, including at the IRS. And I don't think it did really any good. I think in almost every instance, it did more harm than good.
Yeah, really remarkable.
Unfortunate to hear. I want to ask you about the Trump tax cuts, because this was something that did help a great deal of Americans in the first term, and a lot of folks would like to see that permanent and also possibly even expanded. Is that possible?
I don't think there's any question that's going to happen. Finseca, we actually met with almost 20 Republican senators last week alone as part of a fly-in we did. And our message on that was pretty simple. We want permanence and certainty in the tax code. We want to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. What that did, without question, it brought more businesses, more jobs to the United States. It generated amazing growth. And look, if we don't extend that, then the American people are looking at a $4.5 trillion tax cut that they just simply can't afford on the back of all the inflation and all the extra costs they've had to bear. So good news is the Congress is moving forward. The House and the Senate have agreed on a budget. I expect that we'll see the first tax bill out of the Ways and Means Committee as early as the beginning of May. So the Congress is clearly working forward, and there's a 100% chance I expect they'll get that done.
Yeah, we had the Ways and Means Chairman on here, Jason Smith, not too long ago, and he's adamant they're going to get it done. It's essential, so it's going to be an important one. A really interesting dynamic this year. I think it's 8 or 9 states got extensions for filing deadlines beyond the April 15th. So residents in 8 or 9 states, Florida, all of them hard hit by a natural disaster. Have we seen that many states get a break or a few extra weeks like this in the past? It seemed like a large number to me.
I think it's without precedent, and I think it's sort of a reflection of some of the challenges, particularly the previous administration had in dealing with some of the natural disasters. We got members all over the country, we got clients all over the country, and what I've heard consistently, whether it's California or North Carolina or any other state that's impacted by a natural disaster, is that the federal response and the state response in some instances was slow and ineffective. And I think there's a logical reason why we would want to give those taxpayers some relief. Again, I think it's sort of this pro-taxpayer movement that's occurring within this administration that we certainly welcome, and I think the American people need.
Mark, there was a distinct point in the Biden administration that I remember, and it was when we crossed over into the $1 trillion credit card debt range, and it was also at a time where there were record amounts of hardship withdrawals from IRAs, and at the same time, I think cumulative inflation at that time was like 13.5% or 14%. We are obviously in a much better position right now. But when it comes to people who felt that pain before, and maybe they're feeling it a little bit right now too because of the tariffs, what's your advice to them?
Look, there's just no substitute for a holistic financial plan. You know, if you have all your money in a 401k and there's volatility or there's massive inflation, as we saw in the previous administration, but the volatility in the markets is real. And the dip that we're feeling, the kind of transition that some of the tariffs are causing and the market volatility that even the president has talked about, if you have to withdraw funds from an IRA or from a 401k, and it's during the period of a down market or a volatile market, it does dramatically increase the possibility that you're going to run out of retirement savings. And that's if you're lucky enough to have enough retirement savings to last through retirement. So our advice is, everybody needs to find a financial advisor. Everybody needs a coach. 2/3 of Americans, based on our research, don't have a financial advisor and they don't have a written financial plan. So you have to have a coach, you have to have a plan, and that plan needs to be holistic in nature.
Yeah, really good point.
Safest way, diversify. Mark Caden, CEO of Fonseca, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks for all your wisdom on this.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, don't forget, tax day tomorrow. Either file them or file an extension. Coming up next, Harvard is offering remedial math courses. Yep, you heard that right. Perhaps America's most elite institutions felt the need to have a remedial math class. If you can get into an elite institution, shouldn't you not need remedial math? That's what I would think. But we're going to talk about that after the break. Welcome back, everybody. It's the final segment of the show. Now, when you think of Harvard University, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? I bet it is not remedial math classes, but Harvard, yes, they are offering those for students that are lacking in what they call foundational skills. So what exactly is going on here? With us to discuss that is Campus Reform Higher Education Fellow and founder of Renegade Institute for Liberty, Professor Matthew Garrett. Thank you so much for being here, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
I would think that if you get into an elite institution like Harvard, then you shouldn't need remedial anything.
Yeah, you would expect that to be the case, and historically that has been the case. Harvard's always had a very high standard for admissions, but it would appear that that's no longer the plan, that it's become Harvard High, and they're going to focus on remediation, which is really a tragedy for all the students who belong there and have earned their way in there, and now we're going to find their classes sort of dumbed down to meet the standard of the incoming students.
Yeah, just amazing. the education system, the more it has failed, the more that it has let down students who should have skills to come into the world with, the more they've just given blank passes to people. Oregon just getting rid of any sort of standards for graduation, other states doing something similar. Is there anything on the horizon to reverse this sort of culture of accepting failure?
Well, we're starting to see people wake up from a little bit of it. I think the UC system, Columbia, other schools are still pushing straight forward with their ideas about ideology over excellence. But there are other schools from Dartmouth to Brown to Caltech that have realized that this was really a misguided pathway where the universities got rid of standardized tests and they admitted students based on these fuzzy metrics, race-conscious admissions, that's not really working out well for them. So we're starting to see some schools start to move back towards an obvious standard for admissions, and I think that's a good start.
Have there been any schools where it worked out well? Because I've been in California for the better part of the last 20 years, and I remember they were one of the first to, and a lot of universities in California, to not require SAT or ACT scores. Are there any case studies, any schools at all where this has worked out well?
I've not seen any examples of it being successful. Typically, when we see DEI agendas imposed on any university, whether that be through admissions or safe spaces or whatever other agenda they're trying to impose, it pretty consistently leads to infighting, conflict, and a decline in rigor. So this has really proven to be a failed ideology, a failed experiment the last 5 years or so. And it's really wonderful to see institutions hopefully pivoting away. It took a little bit of pressure from the executive office, but we're starting to see hopefully a pivot away from some of these detrimental DEI policies towards a focus on rigor and excellence.
Yeah. Speaking of DEI and Harvard, today the Harvard University president said that they would resist and fight President Trump's executive orders ordering the university to clean things up on DEI and anti-Semitism. What sort of fight may lay ahead for that university and others like it who go head-to-head with the Trump administration?
Well, we've already saw what happened at Columbia, where they had the same sort of posture. They insisted they were going to fight. And it didn't take too long before they caved, and then they brought in a new president who said that they would follow along, and then quietly started to show signs of resisting, and again they were removed. And Columbia's really gone through a difficult transition trying to find out what happens when you ignore the law, basically. So I suspect the same fate lies for Harvard as they continue to resist and don't want to follow basic civil rights and treat applicants as equals regardless of their race. Well, then we're going to find that they too suffer a loss of federal funding. And Harvard has a lot of federal grant money that's going through it that could be really an unfortunate loss for the community around it as well, if only they would just follow the basic civil rights protections for all of the applicants.
Yeah. When it comes to DEI, that obviously feeds the educational standards being brought down. And it's not because one race is better than the other. It's just that there are a few bad bananas in every bunch. So it's going to bring it down when you don't focus on merit when you don't focus on merit and you focus on things like skin color or sexuality instead. What's the outcome for the American workforce if they keep these standards and these people go out into the world to work?
Sure. When we face students who aren't prepared and they aren't able to succeed in their classroom, they're not going to, without algebra, they're not going to pass organic chemistry. Without engineering, without geometry, they're not going to pass engineering. These are going to have real world effects when it comes to building planes and building bridges, and things are going to go a little right, and we're going to have problems. So it's essential that our institutions match students to the best school for them. And that means at Harvard, they need to keep a high standard and they get to have the best students in the country, and I'd like to see those students excel. And in our middle tier schools, those are great students there that can excel. So we need to match our students at the right institution for them, where they can get the help they need so they can excel and reach their potential.
Absolutely. Professor Matthew Garrett, Campus Reform Higher Education Fellow and founder of Renegade Institute for Liberty. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
I remember a story last year over on Just the News about businesses having to spend like billions of dollars on remedial writing training. You remember that?
Yeah. Who knew that you had to be a renegade to support liberty too? I mean, you had to create a renegade institute to go back to liberty. That's how screwed up our country's
Renegade,
been.
rebel, outlaw. That's what liberty is these days, synonymous. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us tonight. We're going to be back here